yet to come, about God's land. So we've got kind of two contrasting tales that's happening in this section. We saw last time Abraham messed up in Egypt, but then he was brought back, kicked out, actually, in order to get him back to where he was meant to be, in God's promised land. So Abraham returns to the promised land, and we see some things are going well with Abraham, much better with Abraham. It's called Abram here, but we know full well he's Abraham, and he's Abraham today. But Lot leaves, and we get a contrasting story. And Lot leaves with Egypt in his heart. He doesn't go down to Egypt, but he heads in that general direction. And we see that it's really Egypt, or the metaphorical business of Egypt, that's in his heart. Also, Abraham keeps thinking about Lot. That happens later on through the next few chapters. Abraham continues to be there for Lot, even when he's gone away. Whereas it looks like Lot doesn't think anywhere near enough about Abraham and the way of life that he models. I don't go so far on that, because we are told that Lot is remembered as a righteous man in the New Testament. But if you only record a few stories of Lot, he doesn't paint himself in glory for most of the stories. So Abraham we see making a better return. Yes, we see after a low point in Genesis 12, we see Abraham returns to the promised land. He's back to where God has been meeting with him and telling him, you're going to get this land, you and your family, you and your offspring. So he went from place to place until he came to Bethel, to the place between Bethel and Ai where his tent had been earlier. He goes back. What's often the first part of a Christian story? Is it not repentance? Is that not something where we turn back, where we make amends, where we remember how God has dealt with us and we think, I need to be in that place. I need to be doing those things. And it's where he had built an altar. It's where he had already been offering sacrifice or praises to God. It's where he'd had dealings with God. He goes, I'm going back there. There Abraham called on the name of the Lord. He's returning to his roots. David Guzik gives this example that in the 3rd century persecution, there were some heroes of the faith that were martyrs and confessors, but there were also many lapsed believers who failed under the threat of persecution, under the threat of death. They said, no, don't believe in Jesus. We might think of Peter in that camp, right? When trouble and persecution came in the 3rd century, there were many people that said, no, I'm not standing with Jesus. And that caused something of a division. And some churches were very lax, and they admitted those people back just easily without saying anything, really. Others were too harsh and said, no, you can never come back. You've given up on Jesus once. That's it. You're done for. Some struck a middle ground. Most churches struck a middle ground, and they allowed the lapsed people back, but basically as beginners again, not pretending that nothing had happened, not pretending they hadn't been through that. And here in this story, we see that Abram came back into the promised land where he started, but he was basically a beginner in his 70s or 80s or something. He was pretty much returning as a beginner to that promised land place. He came back to Bethel, back with the tent and the altar, doing what he should. He'd learned something from it. So Abraham returns to the promised land. And we might think, well, where did we meet God first? How did we hear his voice? Are there any areas where we need to go back in order to go forward? Abraham did return to the promised land. Oswald Chambers says this, that God is the God of our yesterdays, and he allows the memory of them in order to turn the past into a ministry. When we remember the past rightly, even the pains, they can serve us, they can help us, they can shape our today and our tomorrow. God reminds us of the past lest we get into a shallow security in the present. Our yesterdays present some irreparable things to us. There are some pains in the past where we think that can never be repaired, that can never be fixed. It's true that we have lost opportunities which will never return, but God can transform destructive anxiety into a constructive thoughtfulness for the future. So Abraham returns better. into the promised land. He wasn't the same man. He learned something about wealth that shows in the next few chapters. He worships as he did before. He offers Lot the choice of the land in order to avoid conflict. He chooses to make peace and shalom in that way with his family members. He trusts God and dwells both where and how he's supposed to. He goes and dwells in tents. That might not have been his first choice. He acts as someone who is receiving the promise. Now that's an important one. In terms of how we live the Christian life, do we just know the promises, or do we live as if we believe the promises? If we really believe that God is almighty, if we really believe that he cares for us, if we really believe that he thought about us from all eternity and has put in place a plan in which for us to walk, if we believe that completely, how do we live? Abraham, in the previous chapter, had lived as if God's given him the promise, but really it hangs on Abraham. Abraham needs to get wealth. Abraham needs to survive the famine. Abraham needs to look out for himself. That was the Abraham of chapter 12. And he's prepared to put his wife at risk. He's prepared to leave the promised land. He's prepared to acquire lots of property because actually that's my security. That's my life. God has a lot to say on that. What is our security? What is our life? Is it the one who came from heaven for us? Is our life the one who dwells with us by the Spirit? Is our life the one who calls us and says, you're going to a better country? You're going somewhere better. It's all in store for you. It's all prepared. Live it. So in this chapter, Abraham lives as one who's receiving the promise. He shows he's receiving the promise. He's prepared to walk up and down in the land. That's what you do when you're inheriting something, isn't it? You go and you check it out. When you think that's mine, what do? You go and visit it and you're excited. And he thinks, oh yes, that's all mine. Look at that bit of country over there. That's great, that is. And he's in this Hebron, which can be translated by some people as city of binding friendship. And he knows the friendship of God. He knows what the life of God is. And so he lives there. He doesn't just put up with being there. He lives there because God's told him to walk up and down in it, to enjoy it, to explore it. He knows that that is going to be his descendants' land. And he also, in effect, the New Testament tells us that he knows that's not it. He knows that even the promised land is just a picture of the real land because it's about walking up and down in where God would have him be. Because we're told that we're told that he goes to prepare a place for us. And we're told that he comes by the Holy Spirit and makes a home in us. At home forever with God. That's the promise, which here Abraham is living a little bit of by checking out this land while he's sojourning here. So he walks with God here because he's going to be walking with God forever. Can we do that in our circumstances? God has prepared circumstances for us, lives for us, people for us to be walking around with. Can we walk around here as if we really mean it, that we're going to be walking with God forever and ever? As if we're always going to be in his presence? Lot doesn't do that, at least not here. Lot leaves. And he leaves because he's got Egypt in his heart. Now, I think it would have been possible for Abraham and Lot to have parted company and Lot to have still thought of Abraham and maybe visited him sometimes. Maybe not gone as far away. It would have been possible for Lot to have lived some distance away as well. And for him to have at least inquired of God and thought, God, what do you want from me? What area of the land would you have me have? Where should I live? Where should my family go? But Lot leaves with Egypt in his heart. It tells us that he looked at the land and he saw the plain was lush and green like Egypt. And Egypt in the Bible, at least in this section of the Bible, is often about exile, about bondage, about idolatry, about taking the material things and forgetting about God. That's often how Egypt appears in this section of the Bible. I put not always, Because actually, if ever an Egyptian walks in, I don't want that to be the message, right? Because in other parts of the Bible, Egypt are also called his people. There's bits where they said people from Egypt will come and worship me, right? So it's not that Egypt is inherently this problem, but there's also this metaphor that in Egypt people are living a life which is in conflict. So he sees the plain like Egypt, which we should think he sees a chance to make money, a chance to make lots of money and live not thinking about God. Lot lived among the cities of the plain and pitched his tents near Sodom. Now that says something. Pitched his tents, was prepared to set up there. That's where he wanted to build his life, live his life. Jesus tells us to build our life upon the rock. And when he's talking about that, the rock is his words. Elsewhere, God is the rock. Yes? In one place, Peter is the rock, because Peter has the teachings of Jesus. But you are to build our life on God's way of life and on God himself. Build out your life upon the rock. But Lot pitched his tents near Sodom. Now the people of Sodom were wicked and were sinning greatly against the Lord. That's the sort of place he chose to live. Oh, if I could live anywhere. And he was given the choice, remember? Abraham said, you pick where you want to be. And Lot had a look and he goes, over there, near that people that sin greatly against the Lord. That's where I'll live because I can make a lot of money. There was one time where a friend was talking to me who likes to collect mushrooms. They like to forage. And they said that there was this one mushroom that they asked a friend about. And in the book that they had, it said that the mushroom wasn't poisonous. And in some places, such as I think Russia, that particular mushroom is not poisonous. And they asked another friend, who I think was of German origin, and they said, well, in Germany, we consider that mushroom poisonous. And it's not that one group was wrong and one group was right. It's the same mushroom, but it's about the soil. It's about the soil it grows in. And they said, when this mushroom grows over here, it's poisonous. And when it grows over here, it's safe. And Lot is remembered as a righteous man, but he chose to pitch his tent near these poisonous people who had no problem at all with sinning greatly against the Lord. And it doesn't just mean that they were blaspheming, because we see what the people of Sodom are like. They are people who would even abuse an angel. And elsewhere in the Bible, it says the sin of Sodom is essentially that they didn't take care of the poor. Sodom is evil through and through. They put riches first. They put people second. They put God last. That's a terrible order. So we think, where do we pitch our tents? Where can we grow? Where can we be well grounded? What habits, what people are we around? I think we're in a good place, right? Just to clarify on that last one. James says it this way: now listen, you who say today or tomorrow we will go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business and make money. Why, you do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. We have a terrible phrase in our society, which is net worth. Sometimes people talk about what's your net worth. How can you talk about the worth of a person in terms of pounds and pence? You can't do it. And that's what James is saying. He's saying it's not about the money. It's not about the material things. You can't make a plan in which you're going to go and increase your worth. Not if your worth is based on what Christ has done for you. You don't know what's going to happen today or tomorrow. Lot didn't know. Lot didn't know what was going to happen, that it would be wiped away, those places. Instead, you ought to say, if it's the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. It's not that we don't plan. It's not that we make no thought to tomorrow. It's that we hold it lightly and we say, God, if it's your plan, I hope to do this, and I'm going to act as if I am. I'm going to think about it, but if it's your plan, we will live and do this or that. And Abraham keeps showing care to Lot in the following passages. We're not going to get to them today. But in the chapters that follow this, Abraham shows that he is walking with God and caring for people. He continues to care for Lot. And it looks like Lot doesn't think of Abraham. We don't see a lot of it anyway. Abraham gives to Lot, and Lot takes the best, what he considers the best. But he's wrong, because he's not looking to God. He's not trusting God. And we see that really it's God who's giving. God can distribute the land, and really Abraham gets the land. And Lot barely escapes. Abraham, in the next chapter, rescues Lot by force. He comes to his help. He rides out strong. And we also see that Abraham, in a future chapter, rescues Lot by prayer. He continues to pray for him even when he's far away. Do we have people we know like this, who need rescue, who have maybe made some terrible choices? Lot made some terrible choices. Abraham was there. Lot didn't seem to repay him. Abraham was there. We don't know if Lot was praying. Abraham was praying for Lot. Abraham did so much for Lot. Lot does not return to Abraham, but he keeps returning to Sodom. Yet he is remembered as righteous. Lot is remembered as righteous. We know that it did him some good. Abraham did him great good. So is there a family member or an acquaintance that we need to keep remembering? That we need not to give up on? That we can remember both practically and before God in prayer? Knowing that Abraham didn't give up, even though it looked bleak. Imagine you went out and rescued someone at the cost of potentially your own life. That's what Abraham did. He rode out to battle, as it were. He rescued Lot and his family. And then what did Lot do? Went straight back to Sodom. Went straight back there. Wouldn't we wash our hands of such people? But Abraham didn't. And that's a picture too of Jesus Christ. That he does not wash his hands of us, but rather he takes the nails. Right, we're going to sing one more song to reflect upon that.